I wish I could go in a time traveling machine and fix up with things that I maybe made mistakes on. I tell this to students and they're like, wait, what? You can do UCAT again from uni?
Well, Isum, welcome to the Contour podcast. It's so great to have you on here. It's been a long time coming, actually, and we've had a few errors, but it's really, really good to have you. And I'm really excited to unpack your journey into med and all the things that have brought you here. So to start off, can you tell me a little bit about your experience at Bond University at the moment? So you've moved from Melbourne, gone to Bond University for med school. Tell me a bit about how that's going.
It's really exciting. So I'm kind of wrapping up now first year and kind of getting into that final stretch of exams and progression. But it's been a really good experience. Of course, a bit daunting when you're moving from like interstate, but genuinely been a pleasant experience for me. And I've enjoyed it.
So you're finishing up your year in what, like April?
April, yeah.
So how does that work? Is it trimesters or?
It's actually an interesting one. It's a trimester. So essentially, you'll be looking at 3 semesters throughout the year. So I finish up in April. I get about 3 weeks or so break and I start with my next one. So they kind of catch up in between in the breaks being shorter.
And how's your exam prep going?
Exam prep, it's okay. It's going okay. Final stretch. So hopefully it goes and I pull through. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. So walk me through a little bit like that transition from Melbourne to actually moving to Queensland and things. How did you find that like packing everything up and going up there?
It's actually an interesting one because I actually found out, so for a bit of context for Bond, there's 2 intakes. So you have a May intake and a September intake. Now, for me, I went for the September intake. So that meant that I found out about it in about May, June, that area. And essentially from then all the way till September, I was not really doing much. So in that time, I was originally at Monash for a few weeks doing biomedicine there. And then when I found out about Bond, of course, a few weeks later, I did pull out. And then I was just kind of like a gap year, which was actually an interesting experience for me. Yeah.
And how did you spend that gap year?
Yeah, it was actually a very interesting experience for me. So like you take a gap year, it's like, damn, what do I do with my life?
Yeah.
But I actually spent a lot of that time on 2 things. So friends and family, just enjoying life a bit as well before. But then also I did work quite a bit. So I was doing 2 things. So I was working for Contour Education, part of their CAM team.
Awesome.
And then also I moved on to Coles as well. So that was just to fill in the time.
Yep.
And that was really good to keep me busy because in a gap year, you just kind of get bored after a while as well. So it was nice to keep myself busy, make some money on the side. So
and that would help as well with moving like interstate. You've got a little bit more cash to burn.
Yeah. And it was really helpful because I could continue the contour job. And I kept going now on Contour Med Prep as well. So
okay. Yeah. And what are you up to at Contour Med Prep?
I'm currently on the sales team, also doing a little bit on the operations team and also the medical admission. So doing a little bit of everything.
Okay. Yeah. Working through jobs. Wow.
Yeah. Right. So it's always good. Yeah.
And how are you finding that?
I think it keeps me busy. Also is really, really helpful because of course you're supporting yourself when you're interstate, which can be difficult. But it's also really rewarding and it kind of aligns with my values and I'm really, really proud to be part of that team as well.
Cool. Well, I know from the discussion that we had before this that you've got a lot of great things to share and this is a really good space for you to share that as well. So we'll get into that a little bit later. But in terms of like your university lifestyle and things, obviously you're nearing exams and nearing the sort of start of your second year. What else are you doing outside of uni? Of course, work is going to be taking up some time, but is there anything else that you're getting involved in?
Yeah, it's actually kind of insane because I live on campus. So you know, on a normal school day, right? You go 9 to 3:30, 4, right? And you just at school, enjoy time with your friends, then you're off home, just have a break. But then when you're on campus, it's like no alternate, you're living and breathing uni, right? So I'm with my mates. I live with a roommate in the same room as well, which is actually an interesting one. Like,
you guys get along?
Yeah, we get along. We're best mates, but awesome. I tell people, I'm like, damn, what? You don't have your own room? But it's definitely been a good experience just having people around you. They become like a second family from home. Everyone's like in class together. And yeah, it's really, really enjoyable. And that keeps you busy as well.
Sweet.
Yeah.
I've always wondered what the sort of on-campus lifestyle was like. But yeah, I'm glad you're enjoying it.
I am, yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, let's take a look back. Now, obviously, you're successfully studying at Bond now, which is really exciting, and it's going really well for you. You've had that gap year experience, and you graduated. Which year did you graduate?
I graduated 2023.
2023. Okay,
Yes.
so I'm looking 2 years back. In the sort of journey that you've had, what sort of stage did you decide that medicine was the thing for you?
Yeah, so medicine as a whole was actually something that I decided on very, very earlier on. Now, for me, it was actually some personal things that happened with my family. My mum got a little bit sick, and then I saw that hospital environment from a younger age. For me, that was like an eye-opening experience, right? Because when it happens to someone that you care about, then you see how much impact someone can have. And then for me, I wanted to deliver that impact to other people on a regular basis. And that regular basis was the important thing for me. And that drew me closer to medicine earlier on. But now that I'm there, it's a little bit of a different one, right? Because I've realized that there's a lot of questions that you're told and things that you're told in life. Okay, you should take this medicine or this, and this is how you should go about your daily life. And answering those questions, why are you doing these things, is really, really interesting for me. So nowadays, medicine really interests me because it answers the questions in life for me as well, which sounds a bit mythical, right? But
Oh,
just,
so yeah,
yeah,
makes sense.
yeah, it's just like an interesting, very passionate thing that I'm pursuing now.
Okay. Well, it's really good to see the passion that's going into it. Are you feeling like you're obviously like not being in a clinical environment,
Mm.
it can be, and this is speaking from experience as well, it can be difficult to see how that content that you're learning is actually going to be used, and you're going, oh well, I'm learning my 90th nerve for the day. Like, how is this
Exactly.
going to be useful? Are you still feeling like that? You've got that drive to learn all that?
I'll be honest, sometimes no, right?
Okay.
Like some days you're like, damn, I've got so much stuff going on. I'm overwhelmed. I've got exams right around the corner.
Mm.
Those days you don't want to get out of bed,
Yeah.
right? But the reality is you remember the end goal and you remember why you're there in the first place.
Mm.
And it's really, really rewarding, right? It just really motivates you to keep going when you think about that big goal and why you're really there.
Okay. And when do you actually start those clinical years for Bond?
Yeah, so clinical years actually start third year and fourth year,
Yep.
really. That being said, you do have a little bit of a dabble here and there with something. So, for example, I've already done like a little bit of like an aged care placement,
Awesome.
which is awesome, right?
That,
Like,
yeah.
yeah, it's like you love to talk with a different demographic that you probably don't really talk to usually. Like for me, I've got my grandma at home, which is lovely. But other than that, I don't really end up in maybe an aged care home or talking with the elderly population that often. But that was really rewarding for me as well. And just having a chat with them, seeing what they get up to, things like that. Yeah.
Sweet. Oh, it's really good to see that passion's driving you. So, um, early on, decided on medicine, walking into high school. How did that shift your, I guess, shift your, not only your subjects and
Mm.
sort of your pursuits in the academic sort of sense, but also your activities
Yeah.
outside of those academic pursuits?
I think for me, high school was a very, very busy time. I always kind of wanted to enjoy it to the fullest. So I was doing a lot of sports. I was running quite competitively. I was playing soccer, futsal, things like that, and also quite a bit of leadership as well. So the way to best describe it is I was kind of part of the SRC, which is essentially like the student council.
Yep.
I was essentially the president for my school, which is
Congratulations.
yeah, just like yeah, like it entailed kind of organizing events, liaising with stakeholders, things like that, which I found a passion for as well,
Mhm.
and definitely kept me busy in high school.
I can imagine. Yeah.
Uh, and yeah, it was really, really rewarding for me because I got to have a play in impacting students, but then also charities that we worked with, and it was really meaningful. Yeah.
Okay. And I guess in following on from that as well, with so many different activities, particularly like the leadership and the sporting, I think it does for some people take a little bit of a backseat in the final year of school, the
Mm.
final couple of years of school. And well, maybe not leadership because you only kind of get the leadership positions in the later time. But
Yeah.
let's say you've been involved in music, you've been involved in sport, all these activities. For a lot of people, maybe time dependent or just because they lose interest or something, it will take a bit of a backseat. What would your recommendation be to a student who's thinking about those final years or maybe walking into like year 10, year 11 in terms of picking those? Like, do you keep them up? Do you think that they were instrumental in your success, I suppose?
I think there's two perspectives, right? So
Mm.
number one perspective, and this was what I went in going for. It was like, okay, when you do your assessments, let's say for maths, whatever it is, right? You don't, it's not something that's memorable. It's not something that you're thinking about when you get into uni. It's not as significant. I was always thinking, okay, I want to make the most out of this. I want to have the most enjoyable perspective, right? And that was at the time why I did a lot of those things to just make the most enjoyable perspective from school. But that being said, one thing I've kind of grown and realized and matured about is realizing that those things, as counterintuitive as it sounds, when you have other things going on in your life, it helps you do better in your academics as well.
Mhm.
The reason why I say this is you're not going to always succeed in things. There's going to be points of failure and things that go wrong, right? And in that moment, if all you're doing is those academics and just grinding out, whether it's chem, whatever it is, then you really, really feel bad about it, right? And you don't have anything else to rely on. And for me, whenever things went wrong, there was at least something else to rely on, whether it was a sport, whether it was leadership, my family, my friends. It really, really helped me drive myself forward and have that break at times, which really helped.
Great. I think we sort of, when we look back on a couple of the other discussions I've had as well with like Ethan, and he spoke very highly of having that balance and things like that. And a lot of the other, I guess, we've had on the podcast,
I think it's a
well, have done so. It seems to be a common theme. So that should speak to those students thinking about it, that it is important. There definitely is that perception. And I think about this as well when I was walking into year 11, year 12. I was like, I've got to give up this. I've got to give up this because I'm interested in doing well. And like, I know that medicine needs a high score and, but I'm sacrificing the time for study. But you said it so well, which you need to have things that you can rely on to actually de-stress, to do all those things.
And to make yourself do better as well.
Exactly. It does play into that success in the end.
Yeah.
Plus, getting out for, like a game of futsal with your mates is great. Going out for a run is great for you. And spending time with friends and family is something that I don't think I've ever regretted once, even if you're like taking away from study as well.
Yeah.
Now, you've alluded to something there that I'm interested in digging into a little bit. Now, you said when things don't go well.
Yes.
Have there been things along the way that did not go well for you?
Yeah, I think for me, it's actually been many, many things. And I look back and I think, wait, like every single step, there was something that I guess didn't go as planned. And I can go into some detail as well. For example, year 11, like my year 11 subject didn't go as well as I wanted, right? And in that moment, I was thinking, okay, what do I do about this? So it was biology at the time, and I put so much effort into it, so much time, and I didn't get the result. And in that moment, of course, you're devastated, right? It's not what you wanted for yourself. You want to do so much better. And then you have to pick yourself up because you got year 12, which is just as important. And then the same thing happened again. I was grinding out my UCAT at the time, started in January, started nice and early. And then that built up. And then, of course, I said it. And then I had an underwhelming performance there as well. And then it was another knockdown for me. And then I have to pick myself up again and go through the rest of year 12. And a similar thing again towards the end of year 12 with my ATAR being a little bit less than what I needed to get that dream university of Monash. So every single time a key thing that happened didn't just make, I missed it by a little bit, or I missed my goal by a small amount, which cost me, right? And in those moments, it really, really sucks, right? Because you put your time, your effort, it's so frustrating. But at that time, I really, really found those other things to really help me. So whether it was, okay, after that SAC that didn't go well, was it, okay, instead of lingering on that, how about I focus on going out, playing some sport, going to see my friends, or having some time to relax and focus on my leadership? It was really, really helpful to kind of switch off, because then you're able to focus back in and dial back in. Because what you'll notice in year 12 is, yes, you're going to have setbacks, but if you linger on that setback, it's going to cause you more harm because everything's so condensed. You've got your UCAT, you've got your SACs or your assessments, you've got exams coming up. It's all kind of like an unraveling snowball if you're not careful about it. So that was really helpful for me.
Lots to dig into there. So in terms of that actual, all right, I need to take a step back. This didn't go well. Much easier said than done. And I'm sure that sort of in retrospect, you can say, oh, like I reflected on it and it was good. And, I got through it. But at the time, I can imagine that would be really challenging. Particularly, I found with the UCAT being in the middle of the year, it can shake your confidence a lot because you're sort of entering your like term 3, ending term 2, entering term 3, and you're finishing off your SACs for the year in a few weeks, all that sort of thing. So if you're coming off the back of that, you're disappointed, it can absolutely shake your confidence. So what were the steps, what were the processes for you that helped you to actually reflect and be resilient through that setback?
It's actually a tough one, right? Because I remember vividly with my UCAT towards the end, my scores and things picked up, right? So I was like, okay, it's looking good. I've worked really, really hard.
There's light at the end.
There's light at the end. I'm almost there, right? And then it comes around and it's not the score that I wanted, right? So I walk out of there. I was pretty confident walking out of there as well. And it was a bit of a shock when I found out the score. Now, for me at that time, of course, I'm devastated. There's not much I can really do in that moment other than be quite upset about it, right? But for me, the score that I got, so it was 2,910. Now, at that time, it was one of those scores that was right on the borderline. So, for my year, if you probably got above that 3,000 mark, that was pretty safe.
Okay.
That being said, that 2,900, you're gonna have to work really, really hard, but it's still there.
Yeah.
So for me, firstly, I had to take a moment for myself. That was my number one strategy. For me, what that looked like was a bit of sport. I also did kind of surround myself in my leadership. So at the time, we had a lot of events running. So I did focus on that for a few days just to switch off, think about something other than academics. And that really, really helped me. But beyond that as well, it was the realization that, okay, I can't change what's happened now, but I'm in a situation now that I've got a chance to make this work, but I'm going to have to make it really, really work with the rest of my components being the ATAR, the interview, and that's how I'm going to get it. So for me, as counterintuitive as it sounds, like after you get a poor result, you want to kind of drop everything, right? But after a few days, you have to kind of think, okay, what's next? And I guess that's the next realization.
Yeah, and the reality is like year 12 really doesn't stop. Like, it just keeps throwing things at you, and whether it be sacks, whether it be stuff going on outside of your school life as well, it is going to keep being busy. And like you said, you've got to move on to the next thing and sort of not let that ball and chain keep dragging you down. So going back to your UCAT, just reframing, you've got this nice long sort of 6 month or so period of preparation back in January, which is earlier than I started. But you've got this nice period of time, and I guess would you say that you understood the importance of the UCAT at that stage?
Yeah, I think for me, because I did go to a selective high school, so I went to Melbourne High, right? So
Okay.
every second
competitive,
person, very
yeah.
competitive. Every second person's grinding the UCAT in
Mhm.
class. So I was very aware of how important it was. For me, I think my understanding the UCAT and where I maybe had shortcomings was the way I approached it, right? So approaching the UCAT, I think there were two things that I knew were very, very important to do well. Number one, that you gave enough time for preparation. And the number two was just exposure. And those are the two things that I relied on. I was like, okay, I'm going to spam questions, kind of like if you have a VC subject, let's say like specialist maths, or if it's interstate, an equivalent of that. It's just you spam questions, you get used to the questions, get comfortable, do well. And that's like the, I guess, snowball effect of it. You do really well, and it's very correlated with the number of questions or exposure you have. So I kind of took a similar, I guess, approach to the UCAT, right? So in January started, dove straight into questions, did time questions, just grinded it out as best I could. So
Pretty good.
now, I thought so too, right? But for me, I think I've grown to understand now as well. Now working with students, it's a bit counterintuitive, right? Like I didn't do as well as I wanted in the UCAT. Now I'm working with students who want to do well in UCAT, right? So yeah, you're probably asking like, why am I here? What am I doing, right? And it's for me, it's just the realization that that doesn't necessarily correlate the practice and also just doing well in the UCAT. There's so many other elements involved. And for me, one of those elements that I kind of overlooked at the time was understanding first the skills, the strategies. How do you approach these questions? It's not literally just exposure equals doing well. And that's my biggest regret. Now, for me, I think it came back to, at the time I had a friend as well, and we were both kind of doing it together. And we both were in a similar situation where scores weren't picking up probably around March, April-ish, and we were like, damn, what do we do now, right? Now, my biggest regret at that time was I was like, okay, trust the process. That's what we've heard 100 different times. And for her, she kind of decided, okay, I need to switch it up. I'm going to do something about it. And she actually joined Contour as well.
Okay.
And for us, I think that was where I feel like I should have done something about it as well. So for me, I just kept with that pathway. And unfortunately, the scores did pick up, but it was a bit too late by the time they did. For her, it improved quite drastically. And I think part of that comes down to now seeing from an insider perspective, it's part of those skills, those strategies, those techniques, and how you're able to implement them beyond just spamming questions. And that's just something I realize now, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. And much easier to recognize in retrospect, of course. And I relate quite personally to that as well, because my perception of the UCAT was I understand the significance of it, but I wasn't aware in the same way that sort of contour teaches it of the necessary strategies that I should do to be improving it. And looking back, probably was making the same mistakes again and again, and seeing it as, all right, I'm just going to pack in all this volume and keep doing practice tests and all that. But if you keep making the same mistakes,
there's no point doing
scores
it.
aren't going to go up, and then you get more stress because you're approaching the date. And then I mean, my family had to like drag me away from my desk. But they're like, you need to stop doing it. You need to stop,
Take a break.
take a break. But yeah, lots of really really interesting things there. And I suppose with that beautiful lens of retrospect, what would you say would be your number one piece of advice that you would give to students who are thinking about sitting or are currently sitting the UCAT?
I think for me, one of the biggest things that students hear, and to some extent it's true, you have to write it out, right? Like your scores aren't going to be linear. They're not going to increase drastically. It's not going to be an instantaneous improvement. That being said, you do have to see the other side of it as well. So if something's not working for you, after a certain point, you have to be analyzing what's going on. For me, the biggest mistake I made was I really relied on, it's going to work out. I'm going to get there. It's going to all succeed for me. My biggest regret was not acting on, okay, this isn't working for me. At the time I was using MedEntry and that was the only thing I was doing. Maybe I should have acted on it. Maybe I should have tried a program. Maybe I should have tried something else to see if something else could switch it up and make it work for me. So my number one tip would be always, always, always just analyzing, just seeing, is this the right thing? Is this working for me? And if it's not working and you're getting closer to that UCAT date, which is like ever coming, you really have to switch it up. You have to make something work. And I would encourage everyone to think about that as well.
And I suppose with that piece of advice as well, you're seeing with this friend of yours that you were working alongside, she's gone and taken this sort of different road, and you can see how that has benefit. I assume,
Yeah.
but from the way you phrase it, that sort of benefited her in the long run. And I guess that would make it extra clear that's important to divert and change what you're doing.
Yeah, exactly. It was kind of, well, thinking about it now, it is kind of clear cut for me, right? Because we were at April and we were all, both of us were sitting probably at that 2,700, 2,800, which is not quite enough, right? You need to be aiming for that 3,000 plus. And it's almost like, to put it into like a analogy, it's almost like she took a right turn and I just stayed on the main road.
Okay.
And you can see, because we were both at the same scores. And then in a few months' time, when we had our UCAT date, which is almost same time as well, the scores are very different. And yes, you could say maybe there were extraneous factors, but then you have to look into maybe why that was. And a lot of that was also from execution on the day. Maybe there was a different way to approach questions and things like that. And beyond just exposure, and just hardcoring through questions. And I think that was very, very important for me to realize at the time. Yeah.
One of the reasons I'm so glad to have you here and have you sharing this is because one thing that I really want to communicate in the way we do these podcasts and who we talk to as well is that everyone is sort of done things differently. Everyone's experience of the UCAT is different in VCE or QC or whatever, wherever you're doing year 12 and your final years and all that. But also that not everything is going to be shiny along the way, and ending up in medical school, ending up in science, arts, wherever you are as a student ending up, not everything's going to go well on the way. And I think you've spoken rather so well to all of the different elements of resilience and reflection and actually going through that. And it's really nice to hear that you're not sort of bitter towards the UCAT and going, I just hate that test and things, because I can really see how that perspective could come up. But you're just saying, well, I'm in a position now where I can share this advice. I can guide people and say, it's okay if you're struggling, but like you said so beautifully, if it's not working, let's try something new.
Something else. I think I'm in a very privileged position and I'm very grateful for that, because the mistakes I've made, I can't change that, right? Like, I wish I could go in a time traveling machine and fix up with things that I maybe made mistakes on. But I see students, I literally see myself in students sometimes. And I'm like, I can make a change now that would possibly impact them into the future, literally their lives, right? Or I can intervene with that and I can give my perspective. And for so many, that's so, so valuable. And I've seen that both in my role as like a welcome consultant in sales, but then also in the medical admissions, which I'm sure we can talk about as well. But it's been really, really rewarding for me and I'm really appreciative.
So with med admissions, what does a consult look like? What does that opportunity to share and engage with students look like?
I think for me, with that consultation, it's very much so that everyone's on their own journey. Now,
Yes.
what you'll notice is people have their stories, people have circumstances that they have to overcome. And at the end of the day, they have their goals. Now, this is also another thing that I've learned. And for me, the goal that I had in mind, it wasn't Bond at the start of the day. It was Monash, right? I had a dream of staying within Melbourne, staying close to my family, my friends, and going to this dream uni, right? But I had to move into state. And for me, I think that's a very, very important teaching because, like you said, medicine, getting into dentistry, these are very tough degrees and it's very, very cutthroat, the process of getting in. So for me, I think it's very important to communicate the difficulty of doing this and the difficulty of the admissions process and always having those backup plans in place. That doesn't mean that you're giving up your dream. That's not what I'm saying, but always having those other options, because you'd rather have those in place now and not have to rely on them later than the other way around and be like, damn, I wish I did it.
Yes.
And for me, I'm very grateful because I had someone else kind of push me into that.
A friend of yours at school or something like
Yeah. Um, I was, for context, I was not keen on Bond at all. And
Okay.
of course, that was not from a perspective of the facilities or anything like that. That's amazing, right? But like we know, it is a huge financial investment. And for me, there's a lot of guilt involved in that. I don't want to put my parents in that situation because they had to make a lot of financial sacrifices for it. But I think that person really said, okay, that's fine. Let's not commit to this right now, but just do the application, just apply. And after that, you can make an educated decision with the offer in mind.
Yes.
And I think that's very, very crucial. This time last year, I did have a few students from New South Wales, for example, who are very, very focused on staying in New South Wales. Now, for example, in New South Wales, it is so, so competitive. Like there's a few unis, very high ATARs, very high UCATs that are required to get in.
Well, they got, so Sydney Uni is like, for the undergraduate program. Now you're the medical advisor. I'm not going to know the numbers specifically, but I remember when I was applying, it was like, you need a sort of perfect ATAR and written application's got to be good, high UCAT.
Correct.
UNSW is obviously competitive as well. Western Sydney, is that?
Western Sydney. So that one's super, super high UCAT.
There you go. Okay. So basically you want people to be applying interstate as well.
Interstate as well. So these students, they're super cracked, right? Like amazing results that should be so proud of themselves. And they're looking at these Sydney universities, which are so hard to get into. And they're like, oh, medicine's over for me or dentistry's over for me. And then I'm looking, hold up, well, you've got these other options. And fair enough, you don't have any like intention of moving out or moving away from home. But in that moment, you have the opportunity for a small financial cost to purchase the admission center fee. But after that, you have the opportunity to apply interstate, right? In that moment, you have no intention of going, that's fine, right? But your circumstance could very much change when you're faced with a medical degree opportunity with an interstate university. And you're just sitting there, do I do biomedicine or an alternative degree, or do I move interstate? It's a very difficult circumstance and a very different one when it's faced right in front of you. So that's a very important teaching for me, I think.
That's really, really great. And I love the way that you phrase it in terms of setting yourself up for that future decision. And speaking from my perspective as well, like in year 12, applying to a few different places and did the interstate sort of thing. And when you're in that school environment, when you're doing your exams and even the UCAT and things, you're thinking, all right, well, I just want to stay where I am. But once you graduate and have that holiday break and those offers start to come out, of course, with med, it's one of those courses where you have to keep doing the interview over the holidays. It comes out later than everyone else. Your perspective on not only the course, but also just the world and your willingness to kind of move interstate or go, oh yeah, I'm ready to kind of leave home. And that's going to change.
Yeah.
It's going to change. And like you said so beautifully, it's like, well, if I didn't apply, I have a 100% chance of not getting in.
Exactly.
But if I do apply, there might be even a sliver of a chance.
Because it's insane, because you start your applications in September and then you find out about offers in January. Like, how many months is that? That is so much time of growth, circumstances changing. It's the fact that you might not get into your dream university and so many things like that. And in that moment, if you apply it, you open your door to it, even if it's a 1% chance that you go in there.
If you don't buy a lottery ticket, you've got a 100% chance you're not going to win. It's about 100% chance. Not there anyways, but you know. That's really, really great. And thanks for sharing that piece of advice as well about the UCAT, about being adaptable. And I think that's a really good thing for me as well to be taking into my own life and my own sort of med school as well, because believe me, like whilst it may look shiny to be a med school, and I'm sure you can this as well, there's lots of difficult things along the way. The exams are tough and all that as well. So if we shift a little bit back to high school as well. Now, Melbourne High, competitive school, you've clearly done biology, and I imagine you would have done, so English. What else did you?
I did specialist maths. Okay. So that's kind of like a math subject, and then methods, chemistry, physics, and English. So I had some very science, maths, heavy subjects. I actually love them all. Like they were the best subjects. And I'm so happy with what I picked. Probably the only one that I didn't like as much was English, but of course you have to do English.
Got to do English.
So, other than that, I was very, very pleased with what I picked.
Okay. So why, just back to the sort of why medicine, why did you not decide to do kind of a sciencey maths, given that you've got so geared towards that?
I think for me, one side is I love my maths and my science and that side of things, so the STEM side, but I'm also a very people person. I love talking to people, communicating with people, and just interacting. I found that for me, the crossroads of all that, as well as my intention of making that impact on a routinely basis, was all, I guess, aligned with medicine as a career. And that's really what motivated me to go forward. And yeah, that's kind of where my motivation lies.
Cool. Well, so the reason I ask about sort of what went into deciding your course and things is because I'm really interested in hearing your perspective on how students should pick their subjects. And I've in previous episodes, we discussed a lot about, well, should I consider scaling? Should I consider enjoyment? What's my eventual career going to be? And also eventual course / career, and what prerequisites need to be fulfilled, all of that. So what was your approach to picking those subjects?
It's an interesting one because I feel like it's a question that everyone asks. I remember in year 11, year 10, everyone's like, what subjects, what subjects? And it's a big common topic. And truthfully speaking, it depends, right? Everyone's different. So that means everyone's answers are going to be different. For me personally, I found a correlation between something you enjoy and then something you do well. Now, best example of that is a lot of those math subjects I inherently did a little bit better in because I felt like I was a bit more of a maths person. When I did a bit better, I felt more motivated. And then it's like a bit of like a positive feedback loop
Yep.
where you do better, you want to spend more time on it. And it's like really, really helpful for you to do well in the end. So I feel like the number one thing, if everything else falls down, is you have to pick subjects that you're really interested about and you're passionate about. Because when you're passionate about something, you're willing to put the time and effort into it, which usually correlates in you doing well. Beyond that as well, of course, there are other factors such as scaling, things like that. You do have to somewhat kind of take into consideration. The reason why I say that is at the end of the day, you are aiming for a competitive score via ATAR. So whilst that maybe should take a backseat, it was something that was playing in my head maybe when I took something like specialist maths. But the final thing and the most important thing that some students do overlook is the prerequisites. And I feel like sometimes people overlook them because it's not something that's commonly advertised. But we need to really, really make sure that you're covering those for your dream universities. And then that's the only way you can get in, right? So that's something that has to be covered as well.
Well, you've explored there a really good balance between those factors, and like you said already, like prerequisites are important, and with medicine, like chemistry and English are the two. If you want to do any sort of engineering, I believe methods is the main one. And if you have any sort of design, architecture sort of pursuits, I believe that there is an interview which you require a folio. I'm not 100% clear on those details, but the reality is you do need to fulfill those requirements. And as you were saying before with the UCAT, keeping your options open and applying, setting yourself up well with the UCAT if that's what you want to do, if that's medicine, and then applying to the places so you have those options open as well is true for picking your subjects, whether it's IB or VC or whatever other final year studies you're doing at school. And I suppose on reflection of the subjects that you were doing, it was very convenient that you enjoy math science and 5 out of 6 of those scale up. So English, of course, is sort of stays the same, I think, but having all those math subjects scale up is really good, and having that something to enjoy as well.
It was definitely helpful, so pretty convenient.
I remember one of my best subjects that I expected to be, it ended up being in the top 4, but it actually scaled down and ended up being the lowest of the top 4. Just because it was a subject that scaled down, but then there were other ones which I expected to be lower, which ended up in the top.
You can never predict.
No, never can. And I often say to the students that I tutor privately, I go, well, we can kind of project a score, but people get very lost in these ATAR calculators and things which can be quite, I don't want to say not deceptive, but
can give
dangerous. They can not, false hope feels so sad to say. Maybe just, I think it's so bad to get lost in the numbers, and it takes you away from just focusing on your studies and trying to do well. And maybe it's a good predictor for you. Maybe it gives you some comfort. And I'm not trying to have a go at anyone who does enjoy using those calculators and working alongside them. But at least for me, I felt that I would get too obsessed with the numbers and too lost in, oh, wait, it's a 39, not a 41, like all that kind of stuff. So
I can relate to that. I feel like when I was talking especially about the ATAR being a bit less than I wanted, it was partly because of those exams, right? Those exams matter so much. And then suddenly I found that some of those, for example, the best example I would give is specialist math, which is one of the subjects I was doing. And throughout school in year 12, it was probably one of my highest performing subjects, right? And then exam time, I fumbled the exam and it was so disappointing for me, right? Because you built up, you worked really, really hard. So I feel like that's one of the things you have to really try and distance yourself from those numbers, because that can really get in your head. And at the end of the day, those top 4 subjects, for example, for VC, they're usually not what you anticipate them to be. It wasn't for me. And yeah, I think that's the case for a lot of students.
Well, you clearly still did exceptionally well. But bringing up that sort of special exam, we've talked a lot about the struggles throughout the year, about things not going necessarily your way. In that exam season, right, you've got this condensed 2 weeks of I'm hurriedly doing all my VC exams. And how did you deal with that sort of setback in that period of time? Were there other exams that were more difficult or more challenging or didn't go your way as well?
Yeah, it was actually a really, really bad time for me because I was really bedridden sick as well. It
Oh, I'm
wasn't,
sorry.
no, that's okay. I had fever and stuff the day before. So I remember
Okay.
vividly because our special exam, it's split into 2. So exam 1, I had a fever that day and I was pretty poor. But exam 2 was the one that I really did not do as well as I wanted. And of course, you're devastated, right? Because it was right in the middle of my exam block as well. I had plenty of exams to go. Again, it goes back to what I was like kind of thinking in that moment, right? Okay, I've done not as well as I wanted to, but in this situation, if I drag this on to the next exam, boy, is that going to help my situation anyway? All right. So it is one of those things I could say, don't worry about it. And no one's going to understand it till you're there. But for me, truthfully, it was understanding that, oh yeah, I can try and make this and offset this with the next exam and the next one after that. But in that moment, you can't change anything. And it's really a helpless situation to be in, but it's just the reality, I guess. Yeah.
There's one thing I really would like to quickly mention as well for students in high school. Often the perception is, all right, I'm setting myself up in this year 11, 12, what I'm doing, IB, whatever. I'm finishing, I'm picking my course. That's it, right? I have to make this decision now. I have to get it right the first time. And there's often so much pressure to get it right that first time. From the experiences that I've had in university, not just in medicine, but other ones as well, less so, I would say, for medicine, the amount of people that I've seen who have changed courses in the first 3 weeks, 6 months, after a year, even maybe changed in that sort of break before they've started uni. There are so many different
Really?
pathways. And if you're interested in doing something later down the track, if it's medicine, engineering, you can, take a gap year. You can do an undergraduate course, pick something new. I've got a really close mate of mine. He's heading off for a sort of 6-month exchange, and that's what he's going to do. He's going to come back into engineering. So I just want to really sort of speak to the fact that there are different ways of getting to what you want to do. And if you do end up deciding that it's not for you, that's okay.
That's okay. And I think that's truly spoken. It's actually a funny thing. In my cohort, for example, at Bond, there are people from all the stretches of life. Like the oldest person in my cohort, I think she's in her 40s now as well.
Oh, wow.
And kids, there was a pregnant lady in our course. And then we've got people from all different professions. And it really, really speaks to the fact that we have this kind of set in stone pathway for medicine and dentistry. You get in from high school, you go straight, you do your 5-year course, internships, and so on, right? But the reality is there are so many different pathways. And I tell this to students, for example, in my consultations,
Of course,
and they're like, wait, what? You can do UCAT again from uni. You can take a gap year. There are so many different pathways. And I was talking to my parents about this, I remember. And for them, they're from Sri Lanka. And for them, there's only really one kind of pathway for each profession. And that's something you have to kind of deviate and set in stone earlier on.
Yeah.
The beauty of Australia is, yes, it's competitive to get in, don't get me wrong, but there are so many different pathways of doing so. And you understanding what your goals are is very, very important, because at the end of the day, yes, there's the aspect of you have to do well to get into medicine or dentistry, right? But the other most important thing is you need to know what you're doing and how to apply for that, right?
Yes.
And that's where that can come in, knowing that, okay, I'm going to do a non-standard pathway. That's when you apply from uni and use your UCAT, or is it a gap year? And knowing the options available to you is just as vital, because like you said, if you don't put your application in, no matter how good you are, you're not going to get in. And that was a very, very big reality for me, knowing that if this didn't work out, what was the next step as well?
You've spoken to something quite interesting there, that sort of knowing the pathways. And the truth is that depending on where you go to school, depending on who your friends are and your background and things, there's a lot of people who might not actually know what the pathways are, might not understand sort of applying, particularly interstate as well. I vividly remember sitting down with the sort of careers counselor at our school and going, what's this QTAC? It's completely different to this state system and everything. So what sort of advice would you give to people who are struggling to navigate all of the different information and not having the resources available?
I think 2 things. Number 1 is you have to have curiosity. Curiosity is very important, because at the end of the day, now it's a bit better than a few years ago. There's more information available, but it's very, very clear that you have to look and search for the information, whether that be calling the university that you're interested in or asking the questions. Because if you don't know the answers to those questions, that's really going to disadvantage you. So curiosity is very, very important. But beyond that as well, it's just asking for help and asking people. For me, that was also one of the mistakes I made because I was in that circle of being in that selected school. Everyone just really goes to Monash, right? It's a very small sample space. And I knew everything about Monash, don't get me wrong, but I did not know a single thing about interstate. And for me, that was a big problem because it meant that I didn't have all those options in mind. I didn't know where to apply. For example, I remember so vividly, Bond actually came to my school and had a chat with us and everything. And I was like, yeah, no. And that was straight off the table, right? But I wish at that time I was more receptive to the different options. Now, that doesn't mean that you go and consider Bond as your first option. That's not the point yet. But it's just the fact that you're open to things and you're researching and you're looking at your options. Because once you know your options, that makes it very, very handy to, based on your skills, your scores, to really apply and increase your chances.
So, Ism, to finish up our discussion today, let's talk about the MMI. And of course, the MMI is going to be that final component of medicine entry. And as someone who was hoping to get into Monash, I'm sure that you were sort of thinking about that in those months leading up to the interview program. So how did you go about preparing for the interview? What was your process? What advice would you give?
It's such a tough question as well because I was in that situation. Now, I knew that my exams didn't go as well as I wanted to, and I knew that I had to offset that with my UCAT, right? But part of me still had the confidence of knowing that I can still make this work. Okay. At the time, a lot of my careers advisors and people said, based on past statistics, probably about a 99. That will get me across the line, right? And that was like that magic number that I was really aiming for. Now, at the time, it was a big gamble, right? Because I can't just wait till ATAR comes out and offers come out before I start preparing. And you really had to think after exams are done, what do I do? And I remember at the time I was talking to different people and there were two options that were given to me. And that was kind of the essence of it. Number one option is, okay, I study, I practice for the interviews and I don't get it. Okay. Well, at least I know that I tried. I gave myself all the opportunity to do well in that interview if I got it. But the other option is I didn't do it. And then suddenly I got an interview and I'm like, damn, I've got a week left and I haven't done anything. And I knew I'd regret hate myself for it.
Yeah.
I've worked so hard. I've gone through so much and then I didn't give myself best chance. So I thought, okay, I'm going to put all in, all or nothing, go for this, try my best. Now, what that looked like for me was I did a program through Contour as well, but essentially it was a lot of preparation and practice. And that was really, really helpful, not only for medical preparation for interviews, right? And for the medical school for Monash, but beyond that as well, it really built my confidence as well. And it sounds kind of silly, right? Like we're all focusing on this one thing to try and get over the hurdle, getting into medicine, but it really built those other skills. Now, for me, the sad thing was I didn't get that Monash interview like I wanted, and that was very devastating, right? And that's that moment when I was kind of pushed by my friend, okay, do something about it. Let's apply for Bond. And what happened with this was I used the same skills and it was very easy to translate them over to that Bond interview because at the end of the day, you're still using the same manner, the same matter, the same presentation, and those key principles that I'm sure you know a lot about. But it really helped to translate over. But the key big difference, of course, is that one's online, one's face to face. And that means
big
there's a
difference.
big difference. Yes.
Okay. So with that, like in terms of preparing for that in-person environment, without getting too specific, of course, how did you, so you've prepared for the Monash, you kind of expected this online, and now you're going into this in-person environment. How did you tailor your preparation to amend that?
Yeah, I think for me, it's a very unique position now that I can see what goes into Bond and why Bond cares about a certain, like, I guess, ideal student or what they're looking for, I guess. And for them, it's very people oriented. Now, looking at a lot of other universities, I've talked with a lot of students now, and it's really, really rewarding for me. I get to see what different universities, I guess, kind of highlight and what they're looking for in their values. Now, for example, you might have rural focus or different aspects. Now, for Bond, what I've noticed is above anything, they're looking for you as a person, what you're like. And that's really, really, I feel like, reflected in the interview and all the other aspects of the process. So what that might look like is, for example, how are you able to identify emotions or able to understand situations? That's very much so pronounced throughout the entire interview process and the other steps as well. And I found that their values are really, really to do with you as a person. So if you're able to focus on yourself as a person, what you care about, how you're values align with their values, that would really, really help rather than, I guess, hyper focusing on content and things like that. And I felt that that was the best thing for me when I was preparing. And that really helped me do well in the bond interview.
I think that's excellent that as a medical school, they are that interested in it. And speaking from a sort of clinical perspective as well, it is, yeah, it has become more and more evident being on a clinical rotation myself recently that being a good person, being able to relate to people and read situations, emotions, have a good bedside manner is so, so important. And
Exactly.
maybe, you know, in your cohort, you're not the student who gets 100% on the exam, but being able to relate to people and work with them and treat them and care for them
It's a
is
very important skill. Yeah.
I'd say the most important thing.
Yeah.
So, all right. So overall, we've we've covered a lot of content today, and it's been so great to hear your perspectives on a lot of different things. I'm really interested to hear what this next period of time for you, this next year, this next trimester even, and what that's going to look like for you and what you're most excited for.
Yeah, I think for me, this next trimester, it's probably the most, they say it's the most intense
Okay,
period of
good
the
luck.
course. So I'm kind of going to that hard period because it's, of course, like we know, bond, the course duration is a bit condensed. Now, part of that is, of course, that there are less breaks in between trimesters, but also the content does seem to be condensed. So what that might mean is I have additional classes, things like that during the week. And of course, that's something that I have to kind of deal with and come to terms with as well. But beyond that as well, I think I'm really excited for that challenge. What I've noticed is going through those hardships and things like that, where things haven't worked out like I wanted to them to, it means that when things do work out and when I'm facing, okay, another trimester of hard work, it really makes me appreciate it more because I'm like, damn, this is what I'm doing now. I'm so excited and pumped about it, right? And yeah, I guess that's my goal now, focusing, looking forward. It's really working towards just learning new things and trying to apply them as I go towards my clinical years as well.
I know so little about the way bond works on sort of a day-to-day
Yeah.
basis because obviously I've only got an experience of Monash.
Mm.
So in those actual day-to-day classes and things, is there a good balance between like anatomy and biology? Like what sort of
I
I
think
don't know if a good balance is the right word, but
I think the best way to describe it is like think of a spiral, right? So the way
okay.
that Bond
Yep.
kind of works is they really spiral their content. So you might come across, I don't know, you might go through the musculoskeletal system in week 1, but you might revisit it in week 10 and then in year 2 and year 3, very spiral based. Now, how that I guess manifests in a class setting is you have classes throughout the entire day. So it is pretty intense in that way, but I've heard that is pretty similar in some other medical schools as well. But some days I'd have about 6 hours of classes
Yeah,
or
wow.
really bad days. But essentially it's 5 days a week, Monday to Friday. Classes are pretty good. Like I really, really have to say, because I had that context of being in another university as well. And then I've heard from friends about their universities, their lecture experiences. I feel like Bond does have a really, really good lecture experience. So they're very helpful, which makes it all the more interactive. But beyond that as well, it's really helpful because you have this small cohort. For me, my cohort is about 70 people because 70, right?
Wow, okay.
Because in that September cohort is a bit smaller, right? And it means that everyone's really, I guess, family oriented. Everyone's kind of like together in this together. Everyone's helping each other out. And you see these people for 7 hours a day or whatever it is, right? Bro, like
Yeah.
everyone's so tight and tight knit. And that really, really helps get through those intense periods, those assessments and things like that. And that makes it really rewarding for me.
Some good future referrals for when you practice all those people in the cohort. Okay. Well, I'm yeah, very interested in the day-to-day of that, and thanks for giving a bit of insight into that as well. And
So yeah.
any student who gets the opportunity to call you up for med admissions is very fortunate, and I'm sure that you would be very good at answering those questions for them as well.
Thank you.
I think the med admissions program is excellent,
Yeah.
and the fact that you can offer your experience, I mean, in a formal setting here, and for whoever is watching, but also in a personal sense as well, unpacking that. And I know that if I was 3 years back in time and had the opportunity to call someone up and talk through how I was feeling and what the criteria is, and just have someone say like it's all good, it's in your own time, it would be so encouraging.
Yeah.
So anyone who is interested in sort of delving into that a little bit more, I think I would really encourage them to consider the med admissions discussion. I guess to finish off today, I'd really like to condense our whole discussion, and we've talked through the UCAT, we've talked through your BC experience, the MMI, Bond Uni. I suppose if you had to boil what makes you tick and what has made you a successful student and a successful person otherwise, what do you think is one piece of advice that you would give globally that you think a student or other people as well can't live without?
Yeah. I think for me, it's more so a bit ironically, it's actually the failures and the things that have the shortcoming things that have actually kind of dictated those learnings that I really would feel are very handy for students in the future. And for me, I think it touches on two things that I talked about today. Number one being, I guess, that analysis, constant analysis, whether it's a UCAT, your academics, your studies. If something isn't working and you feel like it's not going to improve, act on it. There's no point just sitting there waiting and hoping that it gets better. So in the context of the UCAT, external studies, whatever it is, I feel like that's a very handy tip. And I wish I did that myself. But second thing as well, it kind of goes back to after your UCAT and after your applications have started, really, really thinking, okay, this is my goal. Don't get me wrong. But what happens if this goal doesn't work out? Do I have other things in mind? Because you'd rather put those plans in place then and there when you can just click an extra button and put that application for that extra university rather than wait in January and be like, okay, well, my scores, you see the cutoffs, you see how competitive you are. If I put that application in, I would have gotten into this university. And there are so many different universities that might be a little bit less competitive for you to get into. And not having that regret is very vital because in that moment, you have the power to kind of dictate your future. So my two tips are those ones right there. And I feel like they're very, I guess, based on my failures or the things that I've noticed as shortcomings for myself in my journey.
Listen, thank you so much for sharing that advice and also for sharing your whole story with me today. I got an awful lot out of it, and I think there's a lot that I can apply to my life now as a medical student, but also for those students who are watching as well. There's so much to take away and so much to kind of augment their perspective as well around failure, around success and all that. And it's really exciting. So thank you very much for your time.
Thanks for having me.
And I'm really looking forward to you sharing all of this with everyone.